SpaceX will be twice as influential as Nvidia and Apple combined. Good afternoon. This is Jim Perry at Perry Capital in Miami. It's June 6th. Next week, the IPO for SpaceX will hit the tape. It is clearly the most significant capital markets event ever and is seen as a referendum on the AI revolution itself. We're going to give you the facts and figures behind the company and the deal, what they mean, why you should care, and what you should do about it. Let's go. SpaceX is going to raise $75 billion next week on its new issuance of its shares at $134 a share. There will be, funny enough, 555,555 shares offered to the public. That, I think, is Elon Musk being slightly esoteric or something. But the point is, it raises $75 billion, which is only 4% of the company, right? So at that 4%, 75 billion valuation is $1.7 trillion. Again, this is why it's such an interesting week next week to see how all these shares are going to be moving between all of these brokerage firms and banks and all these private holders of this company. It's going to be a very, very interesting week. The S&P 500 will not include SpaceX in its index for a year. There will be no dilution effect to that, and long-term investors are not going to make any moves. However, it is correlated to the NASDAQ, and more importantly, it's correlated to the NASDAQ 100. The NASDAQ 100, otherwise known as QQQs, is the top 100 NASDAQ firms ex-financials. It is heavily weighted toward technology and the AI industrial revolution. The people who own it believe that the industrial revolution is in its early stages and has many years to go. Those who don't do not buy it and would never buy it. The point is, the QQQs will be 15% or have a 15% weighting of SpaceX. Nvidia is at 8%, Apple's at 7%. So SpaceX will be twice as influential as Nvidia and Apple combined. That is a recipe for volatility. These stocks are volatile anyway. We're at all-time high valuations. Last Friday, we saw this whole thing come down. Many people believe that people liquidated stocks to make room for SpaceX. That may or may not be true, but the point is that the QQQs do have a bigger question mark now because we don't know what the revenues and earnings of SpaceX are going to look like in a month or a quarter or a year. And the volatility of the QQQs is going to go up. So if you don't like volatility, I would stay away. If you do like volatility and you do believe in the Industrial Revolution, it's probably on a dip a good time to buy SpaceX and the QQQs, okay? The SpaceX IPO will, in fact, be the most impactful development in the capital markets in the history of the capital markets. And the reason for that is the volatility and the volumes and the price changes that we are expected to see next week. Routinely, high-frequency traders control 90% of the volume in the equity market. That's been the case for at least a decade. And in the derivative space, it's even larger. The point is that we don't know what the valuations are going to be, and we don't know what the impact of SpaceX will be on some of the major indices. I think it's fair to say that we know that volatility will rise, volumes will rise, and turnover will be exponential. Wall Street is going to make a fortune on this stuff. That's why it is so impactful. However, in the grand scheme of things, things will settle down. SpaceX will be a major player in the derivative space. And until we find out exactly what the market price is perceived to be by the majority of investors, don't make a judgment based on your opinion about a valuation. It is a speculative bet, and the quants know a lot more than we do, and they know what the exposures are and the risks are. So sit back and watch because, like I said earlier, it is going to be a very, very interesting week. The SpaceX IPO is referendum on the AI industrial revolution. Perry Capital's perpetual fund is designed to beat the S&P 500 every year with less risk. It is a conservative fund designed for growth and wealth preservation. We are heavily overweight the technology sector in the equity market. We will continue to be so because we believe that the Industrial Revolution is in its early stages. The IPO for SpaceX is a new development, an interesting development, and I believe it's a positive development. Perry Capital, in its next quarterly report to clients, will show position in SpaceX. It has a big position in QQQs. It has positions, big ones, in the Industrial Revolution, which is artificial intelligence. We believe in it. We think that the S&P 500 is probably going to be at 10,000 much more easily than it'll ever be at 5,000. And I think that can happen in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. I think SpaceX is going to be a $10 trillion company at some point in the future. 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. So if you believe that, like I do, it really doesn't matter if you buy the stock at 135 or 75 or 300. If you think it's going to go to 1,500, then you're going to take a position in it, as I will do. So anyway, as a concluding note, I will say to you that this IPO represents a confluence of exceptionalism in science, engineering, and commerce. course, it also represents an optimistic perspective for humanity in this age of technology, rapid advancement. I have an optimistic view about this. So that's the concluding note on SpaceX, okay?